Greetings, everyone. Hope all of you are having an absolutely fantastic day. We are back again with more Shadowrun Hong Kong. Thought some of you might benefit from a breakdown of all the party member upgrades. Let's go ahead and dive right into it. The first one is Raptor, who is your rigger. He comes with a unique droid that you definitely want to focus on. You don't get anything for level 1, but at level 2, you could choose between Predator, which is going to give his drone an additional plus 5% accuracy bonus for all attacks, or you can get Mangler, which would increase the drone's movement speed by 1, moving 7 tiles per every 1 action point spent. Me personally, I go with Predator. He doesn't always need to move, but you almost always want him attacking, and so I think the accuracy bonus at the end of the day is more beneficial. At level 3, you can get a shotgun mount, which is going to do an additional 2 damage at the cost of 5% accuracy, and it can also hit adjacent targets at ranges of 6 or greater. It uses a ton of ammo, but that doesn't really matter for the drone. And then as an alternative option, you can get the rotary saw, which is basically a mounted saw blade that it can use in melee combat, and the attack's critical chance is greatly boosted, but it's got a cooldown of 2. Now, which one of these you prefer kind of depends on, do you like leveling up the drone for melee or ranged? Me personally, I always had Duncan on my team who uses rifles, and my own personal character used rifles as well. So we both used full auto, which every time you use it on the character, if you damage it at all, it gets them to stand up. And the main advantage of having a character in melee is that when they attack other characters, it gets them to stand up out of their cover, making them much easier to shoot. So for me, I didn't need anybody in melee because my rifle experts did the job of standing up enemies and making them more vulnerable. If you don't have anybody like that, it might make more sense for you to make your drone your melee combatant. At level 4, you get Overclock, which will increase the drone's AP by 2 and movement by 2 for 1 round. Or you can take Repair, which makes the cooldown on Raptor's toolkit's repair ability. It's going to reduce it from 5 rounds to 3 rounds. So Raptor, he has a pistol, but a lot of the abilities he uses, it revolves around augmenting or boosting the drone's abilities or healing the drone. And so this would make this better. Absolutely, I believe that you should go with Overclock. Basically, at the beginning of every mission, I use this on the drone to give it an extra 2 AP and movement, and this makes it very easy to get the drone exactly where you want it on the very first turn, while also having enough leftover AP to attack any priority targets that you want to take out. Very, very useful. At level 5, you get to augment the firearm systems, making all of the drone's firearm systems pierce up to 2 armor, or you can augment the melee systems, which is going to allow it to bleed targets for 2 damage per round for 2 rounds. Obviously, I went with firearm systems since I'm using this in range, but if you're using it in melee, you're probably going to want to go with the melee augment. And then finally, at level 6, you can get a heavy laser, which does an additional 4 HP damage and additional 1 AP damage, and it has plus 5 accuracy over your regular standard attack, but it does have a cooldown of 2 turns. While you can also take Rip and Tear, where its legs attach on and tear armor away from the target, stripping 4 armor away from the target, which, depending upon the enemy you're going up against, could be very, very useful. Me personally, obviously, I went with the heavy laser. Having a drone that has access to a heavy laser, honestly, it just feels right. Attack is absolutely fantastic. It can hit for a ton of damage, and just overall, Raptor's drone is really, really nice, and you don't have access to a drone like that. So he's someone who's really useful to have in your party from a firepower standpoint. Next on the list is Gaichu, who is a red samurai. At level 2, you get active defense, which allows it to gain a defensive ability that adds plus 2 armor and plus 1 dodge, and it costs 1 AP with a cooldown of 5 turns. Or you could take the bite ability. Gaichu takes a bite out of his foes, restoring 8 HP over 2 rounds and gaining 1 strength through the consumption of their flesh. And this also does +2 HP damage and +1 AP damage with a cooldown of 2 turns. Now, I'll be honest, I would recommend you don't use Gaichu. I think the way his stats level up doesn't make very much sense. He's not a particularly good melee combatant. So if you're thinking, oh, this is the guy I'm going to use in the place of what Glory used to be, no. It's not even close. So honestly, this guy sat on the bench the entire time. At level 3, he can gain their Shuriken ability, which is the ranged attack. Does 12 HP damage, 1 AP, has a max range of 10, which is really nice. And it's got a 2-turn cooldown. Or you can get the Ghoul Spit ability, which again is ranged, spitting infected saliva into the target's face, and it ignores all armor. Does 8 damage with an additional 4 damage for 2 rounds. And it also has a max range of 10 with a cooldown of 2 turns. Again, I like going the roleplay route, so I prefer going with Spit. But obviously Shuriken is a very good option as well. At level 4, he gets Coup de Grace, which is a katana ability, a 100 damage, but can only attack stunned targets. So targets become stunned when you take away all of their AP. So basically, or at least more than likely, you need somebody else to throw like a flashbang grenade that takes away all the AP from a particular target, and then that sets them up so they could use this ability. I'm not a big fan of that, but the other option he has is Bite. It restores 8 of his HP over 10 rounds, and he gains 1 strength through the consumption of their flesh. It does +2 HP damage, +1 AP damage, and it has a cooldown of 2 turns. Me personally, I go with Bite, even though obviously Coup de Grace is a very damaging ability. So if you're the type where you're throwing flashbangs all the time anyway, then this is definitely going to be worth it. Me, I never use flashbang grenades. The rare times that I use grenades is always going for pure damage. It's very, very rare that I would have the opportunity to use something like this. So it depends upon your personal play style. At level 5, you get Cover Base. His metal stance provides a light cover bonus, preventing critical hits in the open. So this allows him basically to stand out in the open in melee range while still being protected. Very, very nice. The other option is Disease. He exudes a cloud of disease spores, damaging nearby enemies. The base damage is 16 with an ongoing 3 HP and 1 AP damage for 3 rounds. It costs 1 AP to use this, and it has a cooldown of 5 turns. I'll be honest, I think this is actually a tough choice since he's going to be running around in melee. There are going to be many times when he could have 2 or even 3 enemies around him at the same. So having that additional protection would be very, very nice. But being able to damage all of those enemies at the same time is very useful as well. Me personally, I'd actually go for the defense. I think that the defense is better. It's going to help you to ensure that he stays upright. The damage is nice, but again, I'm running around with people who are big on damage anyway. So the most important thing for me is that I don't have to babysit you. I don't have to have you use your med packs, or you have to be revived, or worst case scenario, somebody else has to run out of cover to come bring you a med pack. So most important thing for me is that you can take care of yourself. I would probably go with the cover bonus. And then at level 6, you get Whirlwind. Gains a katana attack that can hit adjacent targets, +2 damage. It cannot do AP damage, cooldown of 2. So you can use this relatively regularly. Or you have the Regenerate ability. Gains an ability which lets him regenerate 6 HP per round for 3 rounds. AP costs 1, cooldown 2. Now, me personally, again, I will go with Whirlwind. Regenerate is obviously nice, but usually, and again, this comes down to playstyle. I'm running around with Gobbit, and she has the heal ability where she's going to go ahead and heal the most recent wound that you have. So usually if you're out in melee or you're surrounded by enemies and you get hit up real bad, I'm just going to have her use that spell, and nine times out of 10, you're going to be right as rain. And I want you focused on damaging the enemy. So while being able to regenerate sounds nice, in my playstyle at least, it really shouldn't be necessary. Whereas Whirlwind, I just feel like that's kind of a staple. And when you're playing in melee combat, if there's a Whirlwind ability for that character, then you take it. So me personally, I'd probably go with Whirlwind. Really nice being able to hit all of those adjacent targets. But again, this guy, the way his stats level up, I really wasn't a fan of it. Me personally, I would say that you should put him on the bench, and it's the other characters that you should be using. But of course, it's up to you and your personal play style. Next up is Duncan. At level 2, you get a firepower round. So he gains an assault rifle ability that fires a single shot of incendiary ammo. It does an additional 2 damage and pierces up to 2 armor at the cost of 1 AP with a cooldown of 2. Definitely went for this. He does have the beanbag option when he does a rifle ability that does 2 AP damage and imbalances targets, making them easier to hit on subsequent attacks. And that sounds nice, but again, full auto with rifles sets them up to be easier to attack as well, while still allowing you to do other lethal damage. So I don't see a need to take this. At level 3, you get Mercy Kill. He gains an assault rifle ability that has a 99% chance to hit an enemy who has less than 25% HP remaining, and it does an additional 2 damage, and it has a cooldown of 2. He gains a Subdue ability that has his cooldown reduced from 3 rounds to 2 rounds. Subdue can be nice if you're in a mission where there's like a civilian or somebody who's technically involved that you don't want to kill and you want to just go ahead and take them out non-lethally. That doesn't come up very often, but the 1 or 2 times it did come up. It's nice to be able to have this, but personally, I go with Mercy Kill all the way. At level 4, you can choose between a nail grenade, which is going to do 12 damage and an ongoing 4 damage for 2 rounds and strips 1 armor from affected targets, or you could do a modded flashbang, which is going to have a larger area of effect, and it's going to strip AP from targets. Again, I prefer to go for flat out damage, so I go with the nail grenade. But if for whatever reason you're using Gaichu and you really want to have more flashbangs at your disposal, taking the modded flashbang is going to make more sense for you. At level 5, you get recoil compensation. Full auto fire no longer has a negative 10% penalty to accuracy when used. Obviously, I use full auto with him all the time, so this is absolutely fantastic and makes Duncan significantly more effective. Alternatively, you have the shock baton, which is a melee range shock baton. It does 4 HP and 2 AP damage per hit, but must be recharged every 2 hits. Obviously, I use him in melee combat very rarely, so we're going to go with the recoil compensation. And then finally, at level 6, you get the magnet arm. Duncan has a magnetic cyber arm installed and allowing him to throw back incoming grenades. This ability is actually insane. There can be some fights where 4 enemies all throw grenades basically back to back to back, and he will throw all of them right back at them. It also means that if you have all of your allies crowded together, enemies throwing grenades at you is no longer a concern. Obviously, if a mage firebombs you or something like that, that's an issue. But grenades are pretty much irrelevant once he has this ability. Keep in mind, other enemies have this ability as well. So you have to be careful about where you're throwing your grenades, because if you throw a grenade and then is thrown back at you, Duncan will not then catch it and throw it back. Oh, there's only 1 catch and throw back allowed per grenade. So if that happens, it's going to explode and you're going to feel stupid. The other option is a gas grenade, which is going to do minor HP damage, but it does do AP damage to the affected targets. Again, I don't even like focusing on AP. I'd much rather focus on pure damage. And this ability, again, is absolutely fantastic. Just no question whatsoever. Pick this up. Next up is Isabel. At level 2, she gets a mini launcher, so her grenade can now fire remote mines, which can be triggered to detonate at will, Or she gets Tar Blaster, which is the Tar Blaster program, an upgraded version of Blaster that also sticks enemies in place for 1 round. So if you stick enemies in place, some enemies cannot attack at range. They have to be in melee in order to deal with you. So this could be useful for dealing with them. I personally go with Tar Blaster because if you're using Isabel, it's probably because you are not a decker, and so you need her to be your decker, which means you need her decking abilities to be as good as possible. And being able to mitigate the damage that comes her way is definitely to your advantage. At level 3, you get Steady Shot. So she gets a pistol ability that increases accuracy by 30% and critical chance by a small amount for 1 shot. Or she can get Marked Target, which is going to allow her to reduce a target's armor by 1. I personally will go with Marked Target. When she's shooting, you almost always want her using that grenade launcher. Going to do that area of effect damage. Is going to be very effective against other enemies. The only time I have her using her pistol is if I have a bunch of allies surrounding the only enemies that are left on the field, and I don't want her grenade launcher to impact them, so I switch it to the pistol instead. That's not happening often enough for it to be worth taking abilities specifically focused around the pistol. And Marked Target is going to help her entire team. So in those situations where she can't use a grenade launcher, there's probably a good case to be made that she should just be using Marked Target instead anyway. At level 4, she gets the mini launcher. So our mini launcher is now packed with napalm charges, which ignite damaged enemies. Targets on fire will take an additional 6 HP damage. Very nice. Or you could take Boost Program, which is going to increase her persona's speed while sneaking in the Matrix by 40%. So decking works differently in Hong Kong than it did in Dragonfall, where you actually have to sneak around to get to your decking targets, and how fast you can move to the spot you need to be in is very, very important. So these boost programs, you want them to be as high as possible. If Isabel is your main decker, this is obviously what you want to go ahead and choose. At level 5, you get the Bright Light system, which is going to temporarily blind an opponent. It costs 2 AP to use. It's got a duration of 2, and it's got a cooldown of 6. Obviously, if enemies are blinded, it's going to be significantly harder for them to be able to attack, so this could be very useful. You also get the Jolt Alert system. If Isabel is brought into a stunned state, she'll be jolted awake automatically with 1 AP. So this is really nice for enemies that use flashbang grenades or they use shock sticks that can take away all of your AP. If your AP is reduced to 0, you're automatically stunned for the next round. This will make it where that is not the case. So it could be very nice. Honestly, both of these have their use cases. I would probably go with the Jolt Alert system. There are just a lot of enemies in this game that love to take all away your AP and try to stun you, and being able to mitigate that is really, really helpful. And then finally, at level 6, you can have the mini launcher, which now strips 1 armor with every normal shot. That's very, very nice. Or you can get pain suppression. When she's in the Matrix, attacks on her physical body are reduced by 3 damage. So while your decker is in the Matrix, they can still be shot or hit or things of that nature. And if they take a certain amount of damage, it's going to pull them out of the Matrix, which I think does additional damage on top of that. But it also is going to cause you to have to start over whatever decking you were doing back from square one. So it's definitely important to avoid that situation. But me personally, I would say you avoid that by positioning your party members properly to ensure that they're attacking those high priority targets that are in position to attack you while you are decking. And then focusing on damage mitigation for your decker doesn't really do all that much for you in the long term. So frankly, I would go with the mini launcher instead to make her as effective in that area as possible. And then finally on the list is Gobbit. So at level 2, she gets ranged combat, which is going to increase her ranged combat skill and her SMG specialization by 1. The level of your ranged combat and your SMG can impact what weapons you have available to you. So potentially you could add on some higher quality weapons for her and make her much more effective with that SMG. Or you can get spirit control. Spirits will never break away in the first 2 rounds after summoning them. Undoubtedly take this. undoubtedly take this. Gobbit is an amazing summoner. Like the fact that your summons, no matter what, are going to stick with you for 2 rounds is a major, major benefit. Absolutely, I would say you want to go for this. At level 3, you're going to get Destroy Spirit. Gobbit's Rat Totem invocation does 99 damage to any hostile spirit. The spell can only be used on spirits. Your other option is Steal Spirit. The Rat Totem can steal control of spirits that have been summoned by enemy shamans. Note that only 1 spirit can be under control until rank 5 spirit control, where it increases to 2. Undoubtedly, you should take this. You do face some spirits, but it's very rare. It's not really a common occurrence, whereas enemies using spirits summons against you happens all the time. And so I definitely would recommend that you go ahead and take this. And I say that this is rare because even though they're summoning spirits, a lot of times you don't want to focus on the spirit that's been summoned. You want to focus on the shaman that brought it into this world, because that is going to disperse the spirit anyway. So even though it's on the field, you're not really interested in doing damage to it directly. You want to go ahead and go straight to the source so that it doesn't summon anything else as well. At level 4, you've got Poison Fog. So her Poison Fog is going to be upgraded to Acidic Fog, doing AP damage to those affected as well as HP damage. Or you have the option of Shrine Spirits. So spirits summoned by Gobbit are now present for an additional turn before dispelling themselves for a total of 3 rounds. Very, very nice. Again, she's the ultimate summoner, extremely useful. I actually never used this Poison Fog ability because it's hard to predict. It's not necessarily hard to predict where enemies are going to run, but it just never felt worth the AP. It just never felt worth it to me. So absolutely, I would go with the Shrine Spirits option. At level 5, you get Plague Barrier. She gains a Conjuring spell, which sets 4 heavy cover barriers that last for 3 rounds. Anyone that enters take negative 14 HP and negative 1 AP damage. Or she can get the Devil Rat Spirit Fetish. She now carries a Devil Rat Spirit Fetish in her standard equipment. I personally would go with the Devil Rat. Devil Rat is an amazing summon. It's going to benefit from being forced to remain for at least 2 rounds. It gets an ability that can hit other targets. Its standard 1 AP ability not only damages the enemy, but also takes away AP. So 3 rounds of that can actually stun an enemy, again, setting them up for more damage and mitigating whatever damage they would do. The Devil Rat is actually just pretty awesome all the way around. So I would definitely go with that. At level 5, you get Augment Spell Haste. So it's still going to increase AP by 1, but it's going to do it for 4 rounds. And when cast, Gobbit's accuracy is increased by 15% for 4 rounds. So not only are you augmenting another party member, but you're going to make Gobbit more effective with her attacks as well. The other ability you have is Consume Spirit. She can now consume spirits and imbue herself with their power, which is going to give her 20 HP over 2 rounds, and her AP is increased by 1 during that time. I almost never consume my spirits since I want them to be out as long as possible, and even if they turn against me, I know that they're going to dissipate, or half the time the enemies are going to end up taking them out anyway. So I don't really worry about it. So I definitely go with Haste. Haste is a spell that I'm using pretty much every round that it's available. And so the extra boost to Gobbit as well, it's useful for me, and to me this makes sense. And that is my full breakdown of all the party member upgrades. Hope all of you enjoyed this video. If you did, please leave me a like, share this content, subscribe to the channel, and become a member if you haven't already. I will see you all in the next video. Take care.